an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
Let's get ready to rumble! It's showtime.
Yeah, here we go. It is the final Friday of June 2024, the 28th day of the month. Heading for the long holiday weekend in this part of the world. And just so happens that Canada Day falling on the Monday, so that kind of stretches things out for a lot of folks, which is nice. And I always have to laugh. When people say, well, we should just, have the holiday always on a Monday. No, that's not kind of how it works. It's like, you don't move Christmas. Anyway, here we go. It's On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. Dave Trafford here with you from Story Studio Network. Keith Leslie joining us. And it's one of those things, we'll get to what's going on at Queen's Park, and I realize they're in recess, but as we pointed out in the past, Keith, sometimes some of the most interesting shit happens in provincial politics when the legislature's not sitting. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to Colin DeMello's interview with Bonnie Crombie. I actually, and we'll get to it, but I invited Colin on. He said he wanted to join us this morning, but he's on the road to Montreal. So I hope it's safe travels. But just for the record, we are giving Colin credit for the interview that he did with Bonnie Crombie, the leader of the Ontario Liberals. But we can't really go anywhere today without talking about the shit show, as Dana Bash might have put it at CNN, the first debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. This was shit show 2.0 last night, watching that debate. And it was worse than a car wreck. I mean, I don't know what Democrat... You got to think that all of the fire alarms are going off in Democratic headquarters across the country in the United States after Joe Biden's performance last night.
I think Linwood Barclay, the author, posted last night, this is like the Hindenburg crashing into the Titanic. That's why he's an author.
And if it wasn't so serious, it would be funny. But this is serious shit.
Oh, and quite frankly, 10 minutes in, everybody knew. Republicans, Democrats, they were admitting to themselves, oh my God, this is far, far worse than we imagined. President Biden's speech was just so stiff and halting, and then he started, of course, losing his track. He'd lose his train of thought. Number one, number two, and he was blowing the key issues like he just couldn't ad-lib anything. They crammed so many facts in him, he was just spewing them out. But the minute he had to react to something, he was just lost. And I think it was stunning to all of every American and everybody watching around the world, just how frail and feeble he basically came across, and that there's just no confidence that this man has 4 more years in him. There's going to be just infinite pushes. I still think this is one of the reasons why the party wanted to have the debate before their convention, so they can now say to Mr. Biden, watch the tape. You know yourself. You've been in politics long enough. That's not a man people are going to vote for as president. It's just not. He will not get reelected. So they have to change candidates. And whether that's Biden resigns or whether they convince him, I don't know. But that was the worst showing ever possible. And I think the expectations were pretty low. We just wanted him, not to have seniors moments and stuff. And it was just complete proof of what everyone has been saying, that he's just, not ready for 4 more years of this.
Well, he's not ready for 4 more months.
Yes.
I mean, seriously. And it's 5 months to get to the election day. And early voting will play a factor in all of this. It doesn't matter. There will be no October surprise. This for him. This was it.
That was it. Right. The performance, as I said, was shocking. It's just going to leave. There's no one going to say, well, we can run behind this man. They have to have a new ticket. They have to have, whether they're going to dust off Gavin Newsom and say it's not 4 years from now, it's now, or whomever. They've got to get some other candidate out there and get them out there immediately. And they can have, a big rally at the convention. They've got the convention coming up. It's a great time to bring a new leader in if they can get one, and have the drama of a leader being elected at the convention floor, which we haven't seen in forever.
No.
Those kind of things would be fantastic, really. It's their one chance to rejuvenate and put a different face on it. But if they're going to go ahead and continue with Biden and have a convention where they declare Biden they're doomed as doomed can be, as Martin Short would say.
Well, and I think the the advantage, the only way they really get an advantage here is not to have a singular candidate. They have to have 5, maybe 6 people saying, I want the job. And they have to be nominated in there. And then you're right. I think you're going to have to look at it and say, it doesn't matter what happened in the primaries. It was nonsense. It was bullshit. I was hearing all the talking heads and this morning and last night saying, well, he got all the primary votes. He was the only guy.
Yeah,
this is stupid.
That's meaningless. You've got a convention still to do. Here you can pivot.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the only way you kind of get any energy and choose somebody there. And I said that last night. I mean, again, like you said, 10 minutes in, I'm on Twitter thinking, well, who in the war room's trying to figure out how the hell do we, get enough people on a ballot to point to somebody else to run in November, or and again, September, sort of Labor Day-ish, is kind of that unofficial launch of that U.S. presidential campaign. So, and you're right, a lot can happen because everybody kept saying, well, if it's the State of the Union, Joe, we're going to be okay. Well, that was only a couple of months ago. Yeah. Right? Well, 3 months, 4 months ago. That's how much distance there is between now and Election Day. So if we saw that kind of drastic change, well, who knows what you're going to get?
Is he day to day at this point? Like, is he really strong one day and not so strong the next couple of days? That's what not
like
what
Mark Hebscher used to say. We're all day to day.
Yeah. But we need a president who's on his game every day, all day.
Yeah, I realize that this is almost a spectator sport because we don't, quote, have a horse in the race. But a Trump presidency has some, formidable issues for not just this country, but countries around the world.
The whole idea scares the shit out of people, quite frankly. And after last night, they're going, oh, my God, he wins unless something drastically changes.
I think that the biggest fail, and it's always the case, who won, who lost, what was the knockout punch bullshit, is always the format of the debate.
No.
It was nonsense. Jake Tapper actually said to Donald Trump, well, I'm going to ask you this question. You can take it wherever you want.
You can answer whatever you want.
What the hell's the point?
I spent my entire career fighting politicians where I ask one question and they answer the one they want. No. We don't give them permission ahead of time to do that. So
right.
That format was just ridiculous. So it allowed Trump to be Trump without seeming to even violate the rules other than lying and whatnot. But I mean, he was, you can say whatever you want when I ask this question about, immigration. You can go back and attack Biden on whatever the heck you want. It was not a good debate format. I don't know. The turning off the mic thing seemed to work pretty much. At least it restrained Trump from going crazy.
I think it helped Trump because it made him look disciplined.
Yes.
It made him look like he was standing in his shoes and just kind of keeping, staying grounded. Every once in a while, later in the debate, the split screen was kind of interesting, where he was starting to facially respond to what Biden was saying. But there was nothing outrageous about what he said or except for the fact that Democrats want to kill babies after they're born and all that stuff. Now, but this is what kills me, Keith. Like, there was nothing in that format to say, wait a minute.
Yeah, we can fact check that. Let's just, that blatant one. Let's fact check it. No.
So, I'm going to talk to... I was hoping to talk to David Schultz today. He's the political science prof that we have on the show fairly regularly from Hamline University. And he's a constitutional law expert, and he's been kind of in our corner talking about the federal politics in the United States over the last 8 years or whatever it's been. He is in transit. He's coming home from Europe. And he says, I can't do it, but we're going to talk about it next week. The other thing to keep in mind, he expects this morning that the Supreme Court is going to bring down its decision on immunity. So you and I know news cycle pretty well. All of this talk about how Biden failed last night gets buried if all of a sudden, one way or the other, the Supreme Court comes out and says he's immune or not, he's got immunity or not. Trump, that is. But the war room for the Democrats, I think, has to either way take that as an opportunity to quietly withdraw and say, okay, while we're all screaming and yelling about the immunity issue, we're going to fix this, and here are the 5 candidates we're going to line up for our August convention. They've got to take that opportunity. Otherwise, they're hooped. Yeah. And the rest of the country is, for that matter.
Well, it won't be a fair fight because it won't be a fight at all.
Right.
I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, I think there's no one in the United States would look at last night's performance and think, well, Biden's got a shot. He just doesn't. He just absolutely does not.
Does not. Okay, one of the things that people are talking about here, which I find interesting, and we'll back into the Toronto St. Paul's by-election in a minute, but the Trump election, which seems more and more likely now, seems to be part of the calculus as to how things play out in this country. Last time we were on, we were suggesting that the result of Toronto St. Paul's is going to be the starter pistol for an early election here in Ontario. Seems likely. But it was interesting to hear the commentary on that outcome, and that is to say Trudeau will hang around to see what happens with the U.S. election and whether Trump gets elected, and then how will he position, against the Trump in the United States. So it's pretty hard to have this conversation without considering the November election, because it would seem that a lot of the dominoes here politically are lined up waiting to see, or could be affected by, what happens south of the border. So let's go back. The starting gun has been fired, yes or no, for Doug Ford?
I think the chances are increased now that we'll have an Ontario election a year earlier than planned or scheduled because of the Toronto St. Paul by-election stuff. He wants to take advantage of the fact that the Conservatives are on the rise. The Liberals are vulnerable in what the Toronto Star calls Fortress Toronto for the Liberals. They're clearly vulnerable after that by-election loss. The question now is, can Trudeau, will he take the message, as we've been suggesting Joe Biden has to take the message, and go for a stroll on the beach in Kitsilano or whatever and decide, his future is not as leader of the party. The party needs someone else. Or is he going to, stay on as leader? And will they be the lemmings and follow him off this cliff? Because right now, it sure looks like the federal government, the federal Liberal government, is heading for a huge defeat. And unless they can somehow position themselves, as you say, if Trudeau can hang in and Donald Trump wins, then he's going to start positioning himself. Canada needs to be the progressive bastion against this right-wing MAGA government that's going to be in the United States. I don't think it'll fly. I think he's just too much in the way of damaged goods, or he's outlived his welcome. People have had enough of Justin Trudeau, and so I don't know that all the calculations. I mean, the parties can have them all, but if the Liberal inner core is still going to support Justin Trudeau on this, I guess that's their calculation. It would be great if Trump wins and we can, run against him in a sense. But otherwise, I think, they need to be looking right now at some sort of leadership change, or convincing Mr. Trudeau himself that, he should resign. But we need to see some cabinet ministers, current ones, not former ones, speaking out and saying, we need a new leader because we're just heading over a cliff.
Well, and it's interesting that you should say that. I talked to David Coletto this week on Now and Next, and he is the CEO at Abacus Data. And, I asked him whether or not he thought Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, who has, a downtown Toronto riding, if that riding had become available, would they have held it? And he didn't think they would. He thought that the Toronto St. Paul's riding was the safer of the ridings. So there's no safe ground right now.
There's no safe Liberal seat in the country,
right? If that's the case. So then we're back to that kind of provincial calculus. If you look across the country, there's only one Liberal premier by name, and even at that point, he doesn't really associate himself with, doesn't put Liberal on his campaign material in Newfoundland, Premier Fury. And has little. He's at odds all the time with the feds.
He's in the other Atlantic Conservative premiers. He's on, right. They're on board United
completely.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So what does this do about the brand? Well, our friend Colin DeMello at Queen's Park, the Global News bureau chief, he tracked down Bonnie Crombie and points out that they're trying to rebrand the Liberal Party here in Ontario, and the whole idea of what does the logo look like? And really, the Ontario logo was probably the one that looked most like the federal logo for a long time. Well, now there's a need to change that, and he asked Bonnie Crombie what she was going to do about the Liberal brand and rebranding.
The brand is myself and the team I have around me, and our policies are different. My ideological standing is a little different. I'm much more of a centrist.
Do you think that at this point your personal support in Ontario would be better off if the Prime Minister was no longer the Prime Minister?
You know, I respect our Prime Minister. I've worked very closely with him. I'm not going to make any comment about our federal party.
Okay, so she's worked very closely with him, but in the next breath, in the next shocking breath, when, you know, Colin's pressing her on who's the best friend of the Prime Minister.
I think the bigger friend is Doug Ford, is the closer friend of Justin Trudeau. You see them in photographs and in meetings together quite often. I probably speak to the Prime Minister less than once a year.
So was it once a year or was it quite often? I mean,
you're trying to distance yourself from the federal Liberal leader. Yes, you certainly are. And trying to criticize Ford for doing business with Trudeau, that's one of his strong suits that everyone gives him credit for. He's not dogmatic. He'll work with the federal government. He loves Chrystia Freeland. He's getting along well with Olivia Chow. That's not a way to attack Doug Ford. There's lots of ways. That's not one. And so that's just, you know, here's the Liberals trying to come back from basically an extinction level event. 2 general elections in a row where they were just knocked right the hell out. Now they see this federal by-election in Toronto and they realize how weak they are, how vulnerable they actually are. And that includes provincially. So the Toronto St. Paul's by-election had all sorts of messages. Bonnie Crombie and the Liberals better read what's in there for them and see, I don't know what they do take out of it, but how they go forward from here is a big question for them. The other thing is an interesting side note in Toronto St. Paul's was, which is held provincially the last 2 elections by the New Democrats. The New Democrat vote in that progressive riding cut in half in the by-election from the general election. So the voters in Toronto St. Paul's were sending a message. It wasn't just the Trudeau Liberals are not too happy with. They're not too happy with that federal Liberal NDP Liberal coalition, or not coalition, but their working agreement. Not too keen on that. They're basically fed up with the federal government and the NDP's support of it. So is that feeling generated outside of Toronto St. Paul's? I think so. And I think what we saw in the results of that by-election was, and John's not here to talk about it with us today, but it confirmed what the polls have been saying for about a year now, that Poilievre's lead is open and growing and the Liberals are just falling further behind.
Well, one of the things that comes up, and this is going to be an issue for Marit Stiles, is the NDP's struggle to deal with the Israeli-Hamas war right now. And that played out in that riding, right?
Absolutely.
So we saw that, and I think somebody was saying that the population of Toronto St. Paul's, 15%, give or take, of the voting population is Jewish. So that played a factor in how they voted. And to your point, if they weren't going for the Liberals, they certainly weren't going to put any confidence in what the NDP was going to say or do about relations with Israel and what to do about Hamas.
If they felt abandoned by Trudeau and the Liberals, they certainly didn't. They felt far worse about the New Democrats and their inability to even come together as a caucus on this issue. And it's just, it's dividing the NDP, and it divides everyone, it seems, at this point. So that's a big vulnerability for the New Democrats. And it, as you say, it played out in this riding. This riding, I think, for people who are unfamiliar with Toronto St. Paul's, it's very interesting. You said it's about 15% Jewish. It's got some very, very wealthy people, nice, big, fancy, but 2/3 of the people in it are renters. So it's a real good microcosm of Canada in a sense. Not atypically, but at least it gives you an idea. There's a lot of different interests there. And they were all pretty much united in the Conservative winner wouldn't talk to a reporter, wouldn't debate the other candidates.
Nope.
As per usual, had nothing. I was asked on CHCH, was it Poilievre's message that won through? I said, well, it certainly wasn't the candidate's message, because all he did was spout, axe the tax, we can't afford Trudeau. Like, he was just spouting Poilievre's slogans. He wasn't actually offering anything. No media interviews, no watching. People couldn't go knock doors with him, no debates, and he wins, and wins handily in a Liberal stronghold. So that just tells you that people, they want to change. They don't care if you're playing by the rules. They know that the Conservative candidates don't debate other candidates anymore. And I guess voters are going, no, I don't watch the debates anyway. Well, there was a pretty key debate last night. How important debates are, I still think they're critically important. If you can't debate your fellow candidates and just say what you mean, defend, as opposed to just attacking, defend and put out your own policies, why should we vote for you? Well, because we're falling into that trap where we're throwing the guys out as opposed to electing you.
Yeah, and clearly that whole, mood for change federally is obvious.
It's unbelievable at this point.
Well, but provincially, we still don't have that. Now, I don't know if anything, how much is going to change on that regard. And, you and I and John have run around the mulberry bush, I don't know how many times on the Greenbelt. The news last Friday, the Friday dump was, oh, by the way, we're closing the Science Center. And all of the debate since then about, well, do you have to, can you not put some money into, et cetera, and all the various folks who are coming out. And I realize that seems like a self-inflicted wound to me, rather than saying, here were the possibilities, because when you start to dig into that report, it doesn't actually say you got to close it now.
Not even close. The engineering report that they're citing said that basically about 5% of the roof areas of the 3 buildings need to be rehabilitated. They should be done by Halloween, but the areas below them should be cordoned off like a construction zone. That's it. There's no immediate closure of this thing. This repair project, by the way, was hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions. Could have kept the place open. Now, as you say, we've got private people coming forward and foundations saying, we'll put up that $1 million. We'll pay the damn thing. Keep it open. It was like a drive-by Friday afternoon shooting with no government minister out saying something as simple as, remember when that roof collapsed at the parking garage in Sudbury a couple of years ago and killed 13 people or whatever the number was? I forget. I'm sorry. That's what we're trying to avoid here. Just get right. But no, they put the head of infrastructure in Ontario out saying, well, the engineering report says this and this. Well, we all dug into the engineering report. It didn't quite say that. As they did this, putting the fence up on Friday afternoon as people were still inside. Some woman had her wedding scheduled the next day. There was all kinds of, summer programming for children in that neighborhood, all kinds of things that could and should have gone on. I'm cynical enough to think that it was intentional because there was another part of information, another project information released on Friday afternoon that people didn't really notice for a couple of days, which was that the cost of the Ontario Line subway has gone from $11 billion to $28 billion in just over a year. Mm-hmm. And so we've spent the last week, and it's a week later now, and people are still, that Science Center news is still top of the news. It's still getting a lot of coverage. It's not dying down. But the cost of the subway, that giant increase, people are kind of shrugging, and Metrolinx even admitted, oh, yeah, that $11 billion, we don't put that's just construction costs. We don't put all the other stuff in there. No, that's, so you basically lied to us when you pitched this Ontario line and said it was $10.9 billion when it was nowhere close to that. And that news is not being debated very much. That's a huge, huge, massive cost overrun. The project's nowhere near even getting started. It's getting some acquisitions done, land acquisition. But for it to be that far overrun, and yet we're all upset about the Science Center. And it's funny, I actually had a dental appointment yesterday with a new dentist I hadn't met before. And he was saying, I like the Ford government. I have no problem with the Ford government at all. But that Science Center pisses me off. Yeah. It's people with kids, people have been there. It is a cultural thing. And it does look, and of course, there was a line from one of the reports that the whole reason they want to move the Science Center to Ontario Place is to give them cover for the privatization with the spa and Budweiser and all those other things. It's so obvious. This was just blatant, but why they would do it, as I say, I think it gave them cover. They're willing to take the hit on the Science Center. It's defendable in we're trying to save kids from having a roof collapse on them. And yet we're not really hammering, that massive, I think it's 40% increase in the cost of the Ontario line. People are just shrugging off.
Well, the other side of this is it caught everybody off guard, including the mayor of Toronto, mm-hmm. Olivia Chow, saying, wait, did you read the lease agreement here? You can't do this without, asking us what, and what do you do with the building and all those sorts of things. So we know that a year ago, give or take, the new mayor of Toronto sat down with the premier and they came to some kind of agreement about what's going to happen at Ontario Place, just in as much as Toronto would not kind of get in the way of anything substantial in terms of the development of Ontario Place. But you got to wonder, does this change that at all?
Well, it's
because the province doesn't own the land. That's city-owned land. So all the bullshit around, well, we're going to redevelop it and it's worth this much money and all. You can't do that without Olivia Chow saying, yeah, we're all in.
And the mayor was a bit slow to jump on the Science Center, but she's there now.
Yeah.
She's there, and she's saying, no, wait, we can keep this. Now, I don't think she's in favor of, Josh Matlow has put forward a motion, basically have the city take over. No, she said, we can't afford that, but we can do something to keep it. She's trying to get the province to at least, as you say, abide by the rules of the contract. keep it open now, do the repairs. And to be fair to the Ford government, although, they've been in power 6 years now, the previous Liberal government was pretty bad about keeping up the maintenance, the scheduled maintenance that was supposed to be done at the Science Centre as well. So successive governments are to blame for this. But the Ford government, there was proposals put forward in 2019 and I think 2021 to do some, necessary remediation work on these buildings, and it just was not done. They allowed this to just deteriorate even further. They're not the only government that did that, but it's just, I think, a shame when we've begun to realize people do view this as a real crown jewel of a public asset. People really think it's important, and I think it's important to leave it in that neighborhood. Does everything have to be downtown at the other end of the subway line? That the Ontario line is going to end there. It's already called the Science Centre subway stop. The station.
It's on the crosstown.
Let's just give this community the support it needs and leave it there. Because in the summer, I guess there's school trips year-round going to that place, but in the summer, that's a real community hub and all kinds of programming for children who live in those tall buildings all around there. It's something that deserves to stay where it is, and I think people realize when they heard this one, wait a minute. We know about the move, but why does this have to be done immediately? As I say, it looked like a drive-by shooting on a Friday afternoon with the fence going up. And we had the New Democrat and Liberals now both vowing to keep it open. And the NDP actually was out there tearing down one of the fence sections yesterday. So it'll be a fight. The government's getting a bad black eye with it. But I think, they're going to just stick to it. We told you all along we were moving this to Ontario Place.
The neighborhood, too, is changing a lot. So for those of you who haven't been there in a while, the corner of Don Mills and Lawrence, which is pretty much where the Science Centre is, and that's where the Science Centre crosstown stop is, the light rail, LRT rail stop is. And so the northwest corner used to be the IBM campus, right up there. And if you in the day you'd drive by and it had remember all the various flags from around the world and all there. That's all gone now. It's all flattened, and there are about 4 or 5 cranes on that property, and their buildings are going up fast. Some of it is office and retail, but a lot of it's housing, right? So the idea that this has changed a lot, and there's an opportunity, to your point, to make sure that this becomes sort of a destination hub for that community. I mean, I think there's a reason to do that. But you know what? I think the cat's out of the bag, and it doesn't matter.
I think so. I mean, this is a done deal at this point. I mean, as I say, I think the Ford government's sort of inviting the fight on this one because it's distracting from a lot of the other issues that they don't really want to have to deal with.
Like the LCBO strike?
Oh, my God. How can the LCBO just say, by the way, the union's talking about striking, so we're going to shut down for 2 weeks on July the 5th. You better stock up now. Like the lineups weren't going to be bad enough on Canada Day weekend anyway. But this is just, it strikes me very much that the LCBO is taking the tactic that WestJet did. When the union gives strike notice, they start saying, okay, we're canceling flights and grounding planes now.
Yeah.
And that's what the LCBO said. Okay, you're talking about strike on July. Well, then we're going to be shutting down for 2 weeks all our stores. We'll take care of the deliveries to restaurants and bars, but all the stores where everybody shops will be shut down for 2 weeks. Really? Why would it?
And then open up 30.
Oh, yeah, and then
3 days a week.
Yeah. What the hell is that? That's right. A we're going to hold you hostage type plan. As opposed to if there's a 3-day strike or a 3-week strike, well, the store's open after the strike ends. Well,
I don't understand the strategy at all. I don't understand I get, if you want to kind of reallocate or move some inventory around from one store to the other or whatever it might be. But I don't get the negotiating strategy here at all.
I don't understand it either. I mean, it's basically you're telling people, okay, come stock. The strategy to me is that they're trying to scare the shit out of the population that, it's the summer. I may buy 3 bottles of wine this weekend. I may mean more next weekend. What do you mean you're shutting down for 2 weeks because of a threat of a strike? Mm-hmm. Even if it becomes a reality of a strike, why do you have to close for 2 weeks? Your retail staff can't get back in the store the day after the strike ends? I'm pretty sure they can. I'm pretty sure they're willing to if they've been on strike as well. It's just ludicrous. As I say, it's just a strong arm tactic, and it likens me very much to the WestJet thing. Okay, you're talking about going out on Friday. We're starting to cancel flights now. And then what happens? Yeah. We got a deal.
Well, and yeah, I mean, the feds put their foot down and said, okay, here's where we're going to go. Now, the whole this changes again. You talk about how important the summer is and everybody's off. the barbecue circuit provincially and federally changes. Can you imagine the earful that the premier's going to get at a barbecue because you can't get a glass of brown liquor?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
He's going to show up with cases of beer.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah. But I can go to the beer store myself.
Exactly. Or the gas station and get the damn stuff because we spent $250 million to have it there a year earlier. But that's another whole story. We're not.
Either way, he's going to get an earful on this stuff. So, well, listen, Keith, it's good of you to join us. I hope you get some chance to enjoy the holiday weekend. So thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. And have a nice Canada Day.
Yeah, we will. I think it's. I was talking to David Coletto, as I said yesterday. I'm not quite sure when we officially or unofficially kick off summer in this country, but this is the final official kickoff because after now it's summer.
It's summer all the way.
There you go. It's On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast for Story Studio Network.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.